Sheri, what's the question you get asked most often?
I think everybody is really curious about audience building, and crowdfunding. I get a lot of questions about, usually after a campaign's already launched, which sometimes is too late to be asking that question. Often as well, when you're launching, about to launch your film, and then you start asking questions about the audience, that's totally backwards. That all of these questions really need to be started in the very beginning of this, when you're making the film, when you're writing the script, when you're thinking about it. There should be in your mind, who am I writing for? Who do I imagine watching this movie that I'm writing? I would think that would make it easier a little bit in the process, that you're, maybe putting in jokes, or you're being sure to include a certain kind of information because that's what your audience is going to want to know. If you don't have that idea when you're writing, it continues to be a problem throughout into distribution, because it remains vague. You're not sure who you're going after. You're not sure who's going to respond to this material. And it makes it that much harder, because you're putting all your time and your effort and your money into this without a clear idea of how you're going to get anything out of it. So that's one of the big questions, is audience. And the time to ask that is not, we're in post and now we're trying to figure it out, or we're about to raise money in crowdfunding and we need to figure this out. It's when you're developing the idea. And to start with, I ask, who are you? What are you interested in? What drew you to this story? Why do you feel compelled to tell it? Then where do you hang out online? Where do you hang out offline? What do you read? Who do you listen to? All those aspects, to starting with you, makes it lots easier, because yourself. That's not hard to identify. It's when they start with these demographics, 18 to 35 women, that's a huge disparate group. They don't all love the same things. So thinking more along the lines of interest and psychology and what emotionally moves, it really takes you then out of an age group. You're really targeting then an interest group, a psychology that you want to find. And it's much easier to find those people than when you're just targeting a blank age.
And once you have identified your audience and you're sort of ready to take that next step, what are those next steps? Where do you go from there?
Well, I have sort of changed my thoughts about when you should start this process of audience engagement. One, I think that artists should be doing that all the time. So in that way, you are creating your own identity. In marketing speak, it would be brand. I find filmmakers don't like to use that word, but in marketing, that is what it is. A brand is your identity, your personality. So you should be sharing that personality all the time when you're online. Professionally. I don't mean what are you having for breakfast, where you went on vacation with your family, deep dark secrets about yourself. I don't mean to make all your private thoughts known and your privacy given up. But from a professional standpoint, what drives you? What motivates you? And start. You can start today, with sharing that, of figuring of pulling people toward you who are of that same mindset, who are compelled by the same thing you're compelled with. A great book that I read over Christmas is called Start With Why. It's by Simon Sinek. And he says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So you should always be showing people your why. You should always start from thinking, how does this show why I do what I do? And those same people who are compelled to think that way, or do those things, or are motivated by the same things that you are, get drawn to you. Now, if you're a negative person, and I've seen this happen a lot online, where people are very cutting and they cut other people down and they always have really negative things to say, and then they get surprised when negativity starts coming back at them, on their sites, in their comments, on their blogs, on their Facebook page, lots of negative comment. It's what you're putting out in the world is what is coming back into you, what's attracted to you. So if you don't want that, then don't be that. Don't show that of yourself online. But so that's what you start to begin with. Now, if you have a project, During the time when you're in production, when you're writing and you're in production, you're stockpiling, you're collecting, you're looking for all the assets that you're going to be able to use or that you can use to create more material for later. But hold off on the online engagement, opening up your social channels, till you're about 6 months from your premiere. Because in 6 months, you can keep the motivation up, you can keep the momentum, you can release new things, and 6 months is not a terrible burden. And the audience can stay with you for that long. If you're 2 years or 3 years to making a film, you're not going to be able to keep up that project-specific content release for very long. It's just, it will be too draining for you, you'll run out of ideas, and the audience will get bored. You know, they when is this thing happening? When is this thing coming out? They kind of do expect that when they hear about it, it's soon going to be released and they'll be able to see it. So they can wait about 6 months or about 4 months, but they can't wait for indefinite period of time. So when you're thinking about project-wise, for a long time you're going to be collecting and thinking about how you're going to release. And then when you get into post and when you see, okay, we're about 6 months from when, it doesn't have to be a firm date. You know, you don't have to know. If you're doing it from a festival, you won't know if you're going to get in, but you know around October or around January, it'll be ready and we will be looking to have the premiere. Then get started. Then start showing your project off and getting interest and getting people. Then you're maintaining your pages and you're cultivating an audience for the project. So that doesn't mean that, you know, you have your premiere and that's it, all the efforts go away. No, you're still going to, you know, within release and whether you're looking for distribution or not, you're still going to be keeping up that audience engagement. Often if you are looking for a distributor, they're going to start looking to see how many people are talking about this, you know, how many people know about this. They start looking at numbers, they start doing Google searches to see how many hits are we getting of people that are mentioning this. It's very easy tools to use to find out, is there any buzz on this? You know, does anybody know anything about this? If they can find a pretty engaged audience, a community of people who are anxiously awaiting, you become so much more attractive as a buy than somebody who's done nothing, has nothing out there, waiting for somebody to pick them up. Then they're going, well, you know, we might not, we might, and we won't give you anything up front and we'll see what we do. They're not going to work it the same as you, so their amount of audience engagement is going to be less. You would still have to be doing that even with a distributor. But if you choose to do the route where some part of direct distribution is part of your plan, and I really hope filmmakers are doing that. If you're doing all this work to get an audience, why are you going to turn that money and those people over to this middleman who's not going to do that work, but who is going to be collecting money? What they should be doing is expanding your audience beyond what you have done. And they do it with money more than they do it with labor. I assume what you're going to be working with mainly is labor and not a lot of money. So that's why I say start really tight and core, because that is easiest to reach when you have a little bit of money. But you're still going to be doing efforts, you know, throughout the release, and new opportunities will come. You will find new tools online and ways to use them. Sometimes you'll hear about them from the audience that you've been talking to. You know, media opportunities will come to you. One example of that is when I was doing this Joffrey release, we didn't use Pinterest from the start. It was kind of just coming up or getting popular when we were in release already. And I looked at it and I go, wow, we have all these photo assets and there's all kinds of stuff on the web to do with ballet and things to do with the Joffrey. So I opened up like boards for different themes and put pictures there. Well, we got asked back in the fall, before it played on PBS, by a woman who's writing a book for Entrepreneur magazine about Pinterest for business, using Pinterest for business, and she wanted to know if she could use the Joffrey account as an example in her book, which doesn't reach the ballet audience in particular, but it definitely expands, you know, your coverage, your reach beyond that. And those are things that you can't anticipate when you're doing this. You know, these are opportunities that just come along, and if you have already laid the groundwork for it, you can take advantage of it. So there are lots of you know, these kind of things that it'll, you know, still be beyond that 6 months. It could be another year that you're still working the audience, but you're actually in sales. Then you actually have what the effort is going to go into driving traffic and getting money.
I mean, Sheri, do you find that we see enough success stories with sort of like one-off films? You know, like if the filmmaker puts in all this effort and it's mainly just for one film, is that really enough time? Is this enough audience building? Are we going to see do we see enough success stories, or is this really something where it needs to be more than one film? It needs to be one film led into the next before we really start to see the fruits of all this effort and labor.
Well, yes, I hope that most filmmakers that we know and who are doing this are doing it because they have more than one film in them. Sometimes I think that the ones that don't is because they had too high of expectations. They didn't have they hadn't managed their expectations out of what was possible for their first film. Not everybody's going to be Beast of the Southern Wild. You know, that's not the model. That is the anomaly. It's more likely that the first couple of films you make are going to be very small. They're going to have very limited success. You have to be very careful with a budget when you're doing that. But I would rather see you expect to be small and grow bigger than expect a huge explosion and it doesn't happen, because then it's money loss, disappointment, disillusionment, self-doubt, all those things that crush you and make you fearful of doing anything in the future. It's much better to start small, expect less, hope to get more, but expect less, and build on that. Everything you're doing is building for your next thing, building into the future, keeping those people that are with you and transitioning them, not letting everything fall to the ground, wait several years, try to get it going again. That's so hard. That's so much wasted effort in the first thing that you did, and now you've got to start it again. It becomes really daunting. Do I think we hear enough case studies? No, because most of the mainstream media that covers the film industry is not covering these kind of stories. So that's why it's great. We have Film Courage, that we have Filmmaker Magazine in some ways, individual people's blogs that we can read about these films that we probably wouldn't have heard of, especially if we weren't directly in the target audience, but for sure that they're not playing in the local cinema. They're not going to get a broadcast deal and play widely. But that doesn't mean that they haven't had some form of success or something that they can share as an experience that people can learn from. And those things that when you're teaching somebody, they remember about you and they seek out, you in the future. So I think that it's the job of all of us to try to work together in supporting one another, that we are not all in competition with each other, that the name of the game is not greed and taking from other people in order to make ourselves bigger, that really the promise of the internet is being able to make connections and connect lots of people and be supportive in general. You support them, they support you, and we all grow. We all have the potential for success when we think that way. It's a very radical thing I'm saying. I know it sounds very new age and love in or whatever. Totally not Hollywood. I'm cool with not being totally Hollywood, but I know that it works. I know that you can grow and succeed by helping other people. So I encourage people to just do that mindset shift a little bit, that it's not so selfish and more self-giving will prevail, that you will see success out of it.
At what stage of the filmmaking process should filmmakers bring on their marketing team? Is it during the screenwriting process? Is it during pre-production? Or is it best just to wait until you're finally in post-production and then you start thinking about selling the film? Which of these time periods best positions the producers to have a film that's going to successfully reach the market?
So, as I said, that really thinking about who your audience is, and I think that this is a misunderstanding as well, that marketing strategy is different than marketing tactics, like the things that you do in order to market your film. Strategy speaks to who and where. So you don't need a team of people to tell you that. Like, you need to be thinking about those two things when you're very early into developing your idea. So there's no need to hire a special person to tell you about that. As I said, if you're thinking about who am I, that helps you to narrow down the strategy that you're going to be following. Now, you can talk to any manner of marketing people and they will tell you, oh yes, well, you're thinking too narrowly, we could expand out bigger, wider, more. Sure, you can get unbelievably wider, in any of this, but in general, the independents that I know and talk to every day, they don't have unlimited resources. They can't go after this wide, broad audience. So they need to think as small and tight, because that's what their resources are really going to be best utilized for. I think that it is useful when you get into production and you're going to be on the set, that you are so busy doing the actual production and running a set with all these people who are there for a limited amount of time and being paid for that time, that you can't be worried about, did I get all the good photos? Did I interview each of the cast and crew because I might want to use those video clips later? Have I talked to local people who were, to talk about how it was to have a filming in their community? Or if it's a documentary, there were many experts and maybe we want to go back and interview some of those. That person, that main marketing person, is just keeping up with those details. They are not on the set to help with any form of production of the thing. They are only there purely from the marketing standpoint, and collecting material for that. And hopefully working with a photographer or whoever's taking good stills and guiding them on, here's what I need, because you don't have time for that. And then while you go into post, that person is sorting through all the assets and figuring out, what are we creating with this stuff and how are we going to plan out how it's published? how often is it published? And I talked about this in a workshop I did the other day with the Alliance of Women Directors, that you have a 1-7-30 4-2-1 content strategy, which is, you have something that you do daily, which is the 1. You have something that you do weekly, which is the 7. You have something that you do monthly, which is a big thing, but you do consistently that one big thing every month. And then you have something that you do quarterly, biannually, annually. So annually could be like your app. If you're making an iPhone app, you're not going to do that quarterly. You're going to do that once probably. Or that you're making, a new film once a year. I don't know how often, your annual big event's going to be. But when you're making out your calendar, you say, okay, here are the things I'm going to do every day. I'm going to have a Facebook post, maybe several. I'm going to do Twitter, have maybe several. Post to my social channels. Those are everyday things. And I'm going to answer comments that come with that, or go to blogs and look and see if there's any comments that I can leave that are relevant to what the people have talked about, not just there to drop in and put your URL up. Once a week, ideally, you want to have a blog post, something new, maybe several times, but for most people, they can handle a once a week kind of commitment like that. That once a month you can do some kind of Q&A with either somebody who's attached to the production of your film or who's a participant, especially if it's a documentary participant in the film, or it's just sort of a longer piece than your shorter blog post. So that would be a once a month thing. Or you have a meetup or a tweet up, where you might be in a different city and you talk, or you go and do a Reddit AMA, or you do a Google Hangout or something like that once a month. And then quarterly, you're going to do, well, in the monthly thing, you'll probably do emails. So in quarterly, you'll do like a roundup of my 4 best blog posts, or the things that people responded to. Something that sort of takes the efforts that you've done already and kind of put them in a better context for people, that you do once every couple of months. And then the meetup situation is the same, something that you're doing, but it's in a bigger venue, someplace that you're going to be in that quarter, that you can meet up with people. And then biannually, it's some of this is mixed between what you do on the production and what you do as a person, as an artist. You might do a live event of some sort, that you're doing twice a year, and you invite all your best followers to come to that. I mean, you have to kind of think about it, but it helps you to space out and organize how are you spending your time, so that it doesn't become overwhelming, so then it just falls to the ground. If you can really space it out, and then this person really helps to do that and figure out what are those things that we're going to do in that time frame. And things will always pop up that you didn't expect that you can take advantage of, but you have sort of a set schedule otherwise that you are following. And then when you get into festival premiere, that person is sourcing a publicist if you want to have an outside person who has a lot more connections than you have. If you're going to go for a sales agent, then you're working with that person at your premiere and hoping to get a sale. Always have your plan B, that the sale is great if it happens, but not dead in the water if it doesn't. So within 3 months, if you don't think if there's no sales prospect at the place where you've premiered, and within 3 months you're going to be launching it. You're going to be launching on your own site, if nothing else, or getting it ready for iTunes through an aggregator, or getting it for Netflix with an aggregator, or doing your own theatrical tour, and you're going to start booking theaters or using Tug or something like that. So there is a plan, which can be scrapped if another opportunity that's better than what you were planning comes along, but you're not dead if that opportunity doesn't come. So I think that having a team depends on how big of a release you're planning to have, but I don't think that you need to bring someone in in a full-time capacity, or somebody who's totally devoted to this job, until you're about in production stage. If you have a very clear idea about who you're going after, because that person just walking into the set is like, okay, what are we collecting? Who is this for? What are we going to be using? I mean, you do have to have a marketing plan. You do have to have a budget, so you can say, well, I'm not going to have any money to do video cuts later, or I won't have any really much of a budget to do Facebook ads or something like that. So we won't be using those. That's not part of our plan because we don't have a budget for that. So you don't have to hire somebody full-time to get one of those plans. But you probably do want to have somebody more full-time to help implement those plans.
I'm absorbing it all, Sheri, and I'm sure it happens where people come back to you and they just say, look, it's too much. Like, this is too much work. I mean, how do you respond to that?
Well, I told you yesterday I was at Cal Arts and I was listening to some of the classes that were going on there, and it's the directing track. So I'm listening to what all the directors have to do. They have to know how to deal with actors and all the technical people on the set, and composers, and their craft of how they're going to set up shots and all this kind of stuff. And then you start putting on them and the marketing. I was like, I'm already overwhelmed by all the stuff you have to do just to bring this project into fruition. But I can see why this is an overwhelming thing. Now, that's not an excuse to say it doesn't need to be done. It will have to be done, and so you will have to have some help. You will have to be able to delegate. It's not really possible. And people don't make films all by themselves. This is one of those aspects of things that you can't do all by yourself, probably. Now, do you have to have a team of 30 people? No. Or a team of 5 people? No. You could do it with just a team of one person and a few outsourced jobs. A web designer to get your website up. He's not a full-time guy. He's just doing that until that's completed. And then, you have other aspects to it that are just sort of outside workers. But you would want to have somebody who interfaces with those people that can get that done, and not where you're still involved in the process, but if you had to be pulled off on something else, you could have that still taken care of. It doesn't fall to the ground while you're sorting out a fire somewhere else. But it definitely is overwhelming. And the other question that I got was, how do you expect us to do all this stuff even within our own professional life when we're trying to get our movies made? And to that question, I say, especially for people who can remember life without the internet, or life without social media, that there was a time when we didn't have the internet, and we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have email, and we have had to fit those into our life. That we are now expected to be contactable 24 hours a day, no matter vacation, weekends, whenever, and you haven't said, well, I'm not doing email because I just don't know how I'm going to fit that in. You adapted. You learned to fit that into your schedule, and this is one of those things. But also that if you really think of it as a creative process, something that you naturally just use in your life to bounce ideas off of people, to network with people, it doesn't become like this separated duty. It kind of becomes part of your life. You can't imagine. I mean, I can say that I'm probably already addicted. Whenever I go somewhere, I want to take an Instagram picture, of something and share that. And it's just is, I don't think about, oh, I should be taking pictures for Instagram. It's just like, oh, I see this, I'm going to share it. It doesn't mean that people are going to immediately respond and I'll have tons of likes or whatever, but it accumulates, it goes into your portfolio and people can look at them later and that kind of thing. So I know production people get used to new programs, new software, new equipment that comes out, and they've got to learn it, and they figure it out. They, know that they have to stay on top of that for their craft. Adaptability is something that they have to have, and so this is one of those adaptability issues that's going to have to start being incorporated. From the independent filmmakers, I heard, two camps. Mostly people being very positive about it and thinking that this was, yay, finally some legitimate, productions are coming in and bringing awareness to what Kickstarter is. I have to say that before I came here, suddenly Kickstarter's being written about on all these business marketing blogs, which I didn't realize really hadn't happened before. So it almost is, to me, it's reaching out this mainstream kind of audience, because Kickstarter does only fund creative projects. So it mainly was known, in the creative industries. So it hadn't occurred to me too much that people outside of that weren't as aware. I was asked to recently, did I think that we've reached saturation? Have we hit everybody? We've reached the pinnacle. I was like, oh, no, man. Most people on the street don't even know what Kickstarter is. So we're far from being saturated. Yes, as filmmakers, we feel very saturated. You have tons of campaigns going on and people asking you for money. But if you climb outside of the bubble to the average Joe, they do not know what Kickstarter or crowdfunding, the term crowdfunding, even means. So I don't think that we're coming to this period where people will stop giving because they're tapped out. There's too much going on. Then there's the other camp that these projects are coming in and stealing money from us. This was supposed to be for the small guy, the startup guy who doesn't have any other access to capital, not these big guys who can go out and snap their fingers. I don't think there's a limited amount of funds. I think that tons of charities in the world, not to say that Kickstarter is a charity, but tons of nonprofit organizations exist in the world, and they all collect money from the same group of people. And nobody's ever said, we shouldn't have a heart association because we already have a cancer association and we already have a women's group, that kind of thing. That there's always room for other organizations that are raising donations, and so this is no different from that. Do I think that it's going to be possible for every filmmaker to raise $3 or $4 million the way Veronica Mars? Not right now. No, it depends on how long have you been cultivating an audience. They had Access 1 to broadcast. They were a network show. They were only on for 3 years. They got canceled because they didn't have high enough ratings. The ratings were not big enough to satisfy the network, but certainly big enough to satisfy an audience that could help raise $4 million. So I think that the downside of this is how it's going to change the way creators think about investors. Because I think that a lot of times I hear people still say, this is investing, crowd investing. No, investing is you get repaid with interest or or you're making money on the money you put in. This is donation. This is very freeing to a creator because they don't have to concern paying back an investor and protecting that investor's money. Ideally, whatever they went out to the crowd to say they wanted to do, they stay true to that. They don't put it in their pocket and go on vacation. They would that would be the last time they would be doing this. But, ideally, or that they don't radically change and go off from what they said they were going to make, that they do make that. But I don't understand where the thought of it's more legitimate for an artist to be deeply in debt than it is for them to be debt-free. I've been hearing that it's not as legitimate. It's detrimental for them to lock out these corporations and these investment firms and things like that. That's just astounding to me, that we encourage people to be in debt more than we encourage them to have freedom. So I think that something like Kickstarter is amazing for that. Where does it lock people out? banks, that used to loan money and get interest off of these loans. Their living is made from loaning money out. And so if you're not loaning, you're donating, they're kicked out of this equation. My thought, banks have lots of places to go to get money. That the entertainment industry is not their only outlet. So I'm not too fearful that they're going to all go belly up and not be able to find another place to invest money and loan out money. But I think that for creators, this is a huge, huge change, huge opportunity. But it doesn't happen if you aren't willing to cultivate some kind of audience. Rob Thomas, I wouldn't say cultivated an audience, but he has a brand that has an audience, and they kind of cultivate themselves. They have fan sites and they still get together, whether anybody from the show is participating or not. They have connection to each other around this show. Not every show has that. Not every film has that. But it's possible to stoke it. It is possible to grow that if you're willing to do it. And the longer you're doing it, the longer you're cultivating, the more likely you'll be able to raise more money. And we've seen independent filmmakers raising a couple $100,000, on these sites. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's a pretty good start. If not, your whole budget can be raised and not have to do repayment on that is really amazing, a really good opportunity.
Do you feel that Veronica Mars is going to open up a floodgate in terms of, more the celebrity factor, the A-list factor now coming into crowdfunding? And as you see that happening, where does that leave the independent filmmaker?
No, I don't see huge influx of celebrities. I think, most famous people feel like that's below me, beneath me. I don't want to do that kind of thing. I even feel it with just getting them into social media in the first place. I don't need to do that. People know me. I don't have to talk to them. Where they would have a much easier time than somebody who has no following and starting from the ground. They really have to struggle. But no, I don't see big companies suddenly just rushing in and this is a totally different business process than they're used to. They have a whole infrastructure within their business that does nothing but raising money and distributing money and investing in projects and making money that way through investment. So I don't see this as it's going to change overnight. And I know that there are some TV shows like Firefly and that have said our production would be way more expensive. We couldn't do it even for $4 million. There's two things to that. Probably they're right, that there's a lot of a lot of people involved in that. On the other side, I think some of them are going to have to start rethinking how much budget they really need. How much salaries are being paid and how much really they should be being paid. How many people you have doing kind of overlapping jobs that you could cut. I do think that the days of having multi-million, billion dollars rushing into entertainment is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And we are only just now starting to see it. So there are a lot of people who aren't even seeing it yet. But I do believe that we will start seeing studio infrastructure shrinking, jobs being lost. This is not the time to think that your career is going to be dependent on getting employment there, because I think they're shedding employment and I don't think it's coming back. It's not just a period thing. When you're having films selling for $2.99, 99-cent downloads, you can't make that money up easily. $300 million films, and largely that is salaries of people working. Those people's salaries are going to have to be reduced. The salary is going to have to be reduced, and some of those people are not going to be able to work there. So starting to think more like an entrepreneur of, if I'm making this and I'm releasing this, I can make money myself, is a good way to start thinking about it now. And celebrities, again, would be the perfect people to be doing that because they have something to leverage, that before it all crashes to the ground, get your own thing going. And there are, people who are starting to do that. We talk about Ed Burns, but even Tom Hanks and people like that have gone into web series to try it out, to see how is this working. They have almost less to lose than somebody who's, putting all their life savings and trying to get it started, because they're just sort of dabbling and putting their toes in. But they can see, I think this is maybe where this stuff is going, and I shouldn't wait. I should go in and get started and start trying to shape it or figure it out before everybody, finds that they have to do that. So I don't think that independent filmmakers should expect at all to be able to raise money like a celebrity raises money. But celebrities, generally aren't overnight sensations. Usually they've put in years of their talent and trying to get discovered and having people believe in them. And the same situation is happening with you as a filmmaker. Get started now. It's no time like the present to start building up on that audience and that recognition in the industry, because there's lots of ways this can pay off for you.
So whether you have a $5,000 film or a $5 million film, what do you think the minimum budget should be for any film in regards to marketing?
I mean, generally, I say 10% minimum, like bare bones. Not a lot's going to be able to be done with that. If you have 5,000 and you only have, $500 that you can spend on it, it's not going to go very far. I would hope that $5,000 film is a short and it's really a calling card, and that the majority of your marketing is trying to get industry attention. Now, if you can get millions of views, that gets some industry attention, and that can get you some press that all by itself, becomes sort of self-perpetuating. That doesn't happen for most people. So you're going to be spending that $500 in submissions sometimes to short film festivals. Maybe buying Facebook ads, and you can do that quite comfortably with $500 or less. Then when you get into $5 million, then that $5 million budget, that gets to a lot more that you can do with that. And then the sky's the limit as far as your maximum budget. How much do you think that effort, putting that money in, is going to pay off in the effort? Because, you have to get that money back before you're in profit. So you have to be careful of not going the other way, of way overspending, that you'll never see the benefit of. But I give it as a rule 10% as the bare minimum.
What would you say is the biggest mistake that independent filmmakers make when it comes to marketing and distributing their films?
Not having a plan. We go back to not knowing who is going to like this work. For documentaries, it's easier because usually there's a cause or an interest that's very much at the heart of the piece. For narrative films, more difficult, and I tell people to look at what is the emotional core of the work. Is it meant to be edgy? Is it meant to be anti-establishment? Is it meant to just be romantic and illogical and impulsive, those kind of emotional resonance? Because you can figure out an audience type based on an emotional response. And you can start there. Again, like I said, it's best to start with yourself, the reason why that you wanted to tell the story. But it gets incredibly vague about where to go in the direction if you haven't done that work to figure out who's going to watch it. And it's much harder for the filmmaker and for sure a distributor when you have a low budget film with nobody recognizable in it and a very broad story that could be universal. Because you don't have a lot of money to market the film, and you don't have any stars to hang the marketing on. Usually when a big studio makes a romantic comedy or a quirky comedy or a coming of age story, they use known actors in it because that's the easiest thing to hang your marketing on. People know those people and they go to see their work. If you're an unknown director, or if you're, if you have a name as a director, you might attract people to seeing the kind of movie that you make. Edward Burns would be a good example of that, because he doesn't always have stars in his films or known people in his films, but he's a known person. It's the most challenging when it's a hard category to define film with nobody in it and no way to really reach out and advertise your way out of this, to just blanket the place and hope that you get some viewers. One, that's kind of wasteful, but at least you feel like you're doing something. And two, that you probably don't have a lot of money to do that with, so you aren't going to be able to depend on it. So a lot of times when I get approached in script stage, if I can stop somebody and have them take a step back and say, maybe this story, based on the budget you have now, is not the one to tell right now. So put this one on the side for when you do have more money, when you have had some modicum of success with something else, that you can attract people to that story. And it's okay that you have this idea, but it can't be realized yet and it's on the back burner. But no, these are the elements I'm going to need in order for this story to be successful to an audience. Now, if that's not your goal, that this is a passion project, you really feel like you have to tell this story and you don't really care how many people are going to watch it, a big group of people are going to watch it, or that you're going to make any money, sure, if you're realistic with yourself at the beginning and you know that that's not going to likely to be happening, yeah, go now, but if you're just starting out and you have a very limited budget to spend and you have some goals, like I really want to get it in front of a bunch of eyeballs, or I really want it to get industry attention, make something that's identifiable, the audience is identifiable and fairly easy for you to reach with your labor efforts, and it's not going to be dependent on spending a lot of money in ads or hiring a big publicist, or that it must get into one of the 5 big festivals in the world or it's not going to go anywhere, because that's the realistic, those are the realistic things, that it has to have so many elements before it really can get into realizing those goals. So yeah, I would say that the biggest problem is that they don't think enough about who is going to see this.
Sheri, you mentioned Ed Burns. We know you had a chance to sit down with Ed Burns at this past year's Sundance. What is he doing that you'd love to see more independent filmmakers doing?
That he really does think about the audience that he has. I mean, he's lucky in that he isn't starting from zero. He's been an independent filmmaker since the early 90s, so he got picked up in the traditional system, and he's been able to benefit both by being an actor and also being a writer-director. So he can't totally be matched, by the average indie person who's just starting out. But what I like about him, as far as being sort of a celebrity name of doing it, is that he does really devote himself to thinking about, okay, who are my most engaged people? And how can I distribute my work specifically to them? And I think, as you saw in the piece, that he realized in the mid-2000s that a lot of his audience was telling him that, we'd love to see your films, but they never come to the theater near us. They always have such a limited release, and it's somewhere down in the big city, and we don't go down there very often. So we have to wait, and sometimes we would have to wait 9 months to a year. And we forgot about them. We didn't know where they would be. So now he really pushes for online release where everybody has access to them, and he's fine with it. Like, he's adapted his thinking as a filmmaker from it has to be in a theater to I just want people to see my work, and it doesn't matter to me where they see it. That's incredible healthy, attitude to have, and it's much more profitable, than pushing yourself through that old traditional mindset of it has to be on a big screen and it has to go to DVD next, and then it goes to digital after that, and then it goes to Netflix or television or wherever. That thinking more with your audience in mind, and that's going back to who's your audience, not just identifying who they are, but how do they consume media, and how will I distribute it based on how they consume media, not based on how the industry tells me I should release it and how I personally feel like I should release it because of this industry pressure. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't be aware of windows, that if you really do have broadcast potential for your film, you're not going to want to release it on Netflix first, because that negates having that. And it's very tricky to tell people, yeah, this film doesn't have any broadcast potential, because there's inevitably somebody who comes along and goes, I got a broadcast deal, you know. And so it's hard. It is hard to determine early on, you know, okay, we're not even going to go for cable VOD, because if we don't have a significant theatrical, it's not likely to get cable VOD. So we'll just go straight to iTunes and Netflix. I don't know any filmmakers now who don't want to see their film on a screen in some way. It doesn't have to necessarily be a traditional cinema. It could be in, conference rooms. It could be in community centers. It could be in churches. Those are still public gatherings where live people sit together in a communal atmosphere to watch a movie, and those are still legitimate experiences that people are getting just as if they went down to the Metroplex and sat in the theater seats, I also like the aspect of coming to the Q&As and having your screenings be special events, give people a reason why they don't want to wait for it to come to iTunes or wait for it to go to Netflix, or just stay home and watch it. If you have some kind of live experience component to your screenings that they could never replicate at home, that experience, they will come, that this is something special, something worth leaving my house for. But the good thing, about Edward is that he really does care about who's watching, and he's taken that into consideration, and he talks to people. He said that, I love Twitter, I love talking with people on Twitter, and he's really open to that. He doesn't see himself as, I'm an unattainable celebrity and who are you people, I don't have time for you. He makes time. He understands this is a value, not just from a marketing. I don't think that he does it totally with that predatory, because I'm going to need to use these people, so I'm going to do this a little bit now because I'll need their help, and I'm going to use them later. He does it in such a way that they say, how can we help you? That's what you want. You want people to be, think it's a privilege to help you, not feel put upon, that they're coerced into doing this because you've deigned to speak to them, a little bit. Sort of changing that mindset of being more open to talking to people on a human level, even if it's using a tool that's not face-to-face, it's still human communication. You still are human and they are, and treat them with the respect you would treat somebody who was standing live in front of you.
In terms of what you were just touching on there, Sheri, how many films do you think are killed because producers are so adamant that their film has to have a theatrical run?
Meaning that they turn down distribution if it's not going to have
Just
one?
Meaning that maybe, they're so adamant that it has to play theatrically that maybe they hold the film back, or they squander certain opportunities in hopes that, okay, this is a theatrical film and it's going to screen theater, and they're just so stubborn about it that enough time passes that they lose all the momentum that they had built previously, that kind of thing. Right.
Yes, I do think that coming in with totally preconceived notions that are selfish motivations, not anything related to the realistic prospects that your film has, can be extremely detrimental. I've seen people coming to me out of the woodwork whose films have been out, ready, and played festivals in 2008, and now they're starting to think about, what can I do? And I go, that film is 5 years old now. It's known to be 5 years old. You had reviews at the festivals. It says on IMDb your film is 5 years old. It's really going to be hard to now try to launch it out into the market, a 5-year-old film that nobody heard of much then, but for sure has forgotten about now. So not to be so rigid in your thinking about how is the right way to put your film out. Be open to a lot of different opportunities, but then there's also that balancing of, I'm just going to put it on every free to watch site in the world, and then I want to have a broadcast deal, or I get an offer for a broadcast deal, except that I did this other thing and now that negates it. So you have to, it is really hard. It is really hard to make a decision about which is the right way to go. I think part of it is as making sure that the film is as strong as it can be, and I think a lot of people don't do enough test screenings outside of their personal circle of people. They show it to their friends and their cousins and the people who worked on the movie, but they're not going to give you the most honest answer. What you should be doing is filling a room with 10 or 15 people who are in your target audience but don't have a personal stake in seeing a success of the film. And don't even tell them that you're the director or the producer, that this is just a group that's coming together to watch this film that, you know, you have. And take on board what they have to do, more than one, you know, but really think about if enough people are saying a certain thing, it's definitely worth paying attention to. And do this before you start sending things out to festival. You know, you really want to have the strongest piece that you can before you put it out for judgment in the industry, because they often won't go, oh, I recut it and here's another cut, and you played that hand, and there's so many people behind you that they have to look at that you may not get that second chance. So you want to make it as strong as possible, but you want to be open to all the opportunities. Like I said to you, have a plan B, so that if you do have that big premiere and the deal doesn't come, or the deal comes and it's just not very good, you have an alternative. That just gives you leverage. You know, when you go into that negotiation, you go, hey babe, I don't need you. I have my plan and I know what I'm gonna do. If you can up that, if you can build on that, let's see it. But otherwise, I'm not just taking this boilerplate thing you're sliding across the table at me, because I know what I have. I know that I have ways to get it out without your no advance partnership offer that you're pushing at me. And Ava DuVernay wrote about that with Middle of Nowhere. You know, she said, I went into Sundance and I had my date. I knew when my film was coming out. Now, we entertained offers. I did have a sales agent, because I thought if we get offered something that's better than that, we'll just take the money and give it back to the investors. You know, we won't spend it. But it's there, and I have it, and I have a plan. And it even may be that that's what you want to negotiate with your distributor. You know, I have my plan. Can you work within this? I can do these things on my own, but I need help with these things. Can you bring that? So you're very specific about what they're going to do and how much is going to be spent. Remember, whatever they spend, they have to recoup before you see any money after that. So you don't want it willy-nilly. Spending as much as possible, because all that has to come back in before you get any money. Also, you don't want them spending nothing. You want to know, what's your plan? I have my plan. What's your plan? You know, and so few distributors are used to being put on the spot to know that, which to me is very bad business practice. You buy up titles, but you don't know what you're going to do with them. I don't know where did that come into practice, but it's very common, you know, for them to go, well, we don't release that kind of information. Well, I don't sign an agreement until you tell me what's put it in writing. Whatever you're promising, putting in writing, you know. And if you're not willing to do that, you're not a good partner. I'm not turning my baby over to you and trusting you with it, because you don't know what you're doing. You know, you don't know what you're going to do. But you can't have that negotiation if you aren't ready to walk and have another outlet that you've already set up.
Video on Demand, now open to Pro members. They are offering 90% of the revenue to producers, although the Pro membership does cost $190 a year. Do you view this as a viable revenue stream for indie producers moving forward? And overall, what do you see as the pros and cons of Vimeo on Demand?
Well, I don't think that $200 a year is detrimental. If it's that detrimental to you, you're really in the wrong area. Filmmaking is going to be overwhelmingly expensive for you. Maybe you should try painting or writing poetry or photography or something that's not as expensive, because $200 is not that much for distribution yourself. It does not answer anything to the driving traffic to your page, you know, to getting the revenue. It's the same problem you would have on iTunes, on Netflix, on Amazon VOD, on Hulu, any of those other things that having access to the platform is great. Having no audience, not knowing who is going to go there and get them to come to your page and buy is a universal problem, and this new tool is not going to solve that. They aren't necessarily curating. I mean, they do have staff picks and things like that, which is helpful, but staff can't pick every film. So if you happen to get that great, recommendation, that can lead to a bump in sales, but that still doesn't absolve you from the responsibility of having to drum up that audience and drive them to your page. Now, I would suppose that the pro page has insights where you can see the analytics and where the traffic is coming from. I don't know if in the payment scheme they give email addresses because it's new, so I don't know what's happening with that, but that would be helpful, for you to be able to see, okay, if I run a Facebook campaign and I drive the traffic to Vimeo, which is a known platform, and I can see the dashboard behind it to see whether what I'm doing is making an impact. That's way different than what you do when you send people to iTunes or to Hulu, because they keep the analytics. You don't have access to that. So the difference to me, the competition is not really with Vimeo and iTunes, or Vimeo with Netflix. It's Vimeo with a VHX, a Distrify, a Dynamo player, any of those other tools where you can have the film on your website and stream from your website and for a fee, because Vimeo is known and your website may not be known. So people who are used to going to Vimeo, just like they're used to going to iTunes, to get entertainment, they're used to going to Vimeo to see films and shorts and all that kind of stuff. So that gives you access to a bigger pool of people who are used to going to a site rather than the pool of people who just go to your own site. But the good thing is it's non-exclusive, so you can have it in both places. So if you're driving traffic, you can drive it to both places. Obviously from your own website, there will be a percentage that you have to pay to whoever is hosting your film in the first place as that tool, unless you're selling it via PayPal or something where you've set up your own system and you aren't going through another hosting service. But Vimeo, I think, is going to be a good tool for that. 90-10, I don't know anybody who's giving a 90-10 split, but the challenge is still getting them there, getting them to pay. That doesn't change just because Vimeo is now offering pay per view rather than free. Have I ever advised anyone not to crowdfund? Yes. Not to say that they won't be successful in crowdfunding at all, but they aren't ready yet. I mean, the biggest question is, how much do you think I can raise? I don't know. How big is your online audience? Because you're going to need them in order to raise money. So if you have never stepped foot into the online space, you really don't know how that Twitter thing works, or you don't even have your own personal profile on Facebook, it's whoa, okay, you're not even close to being ready to start a Kickstarter campaign. First, you need to get that. First, you need to get that piece going. First, you need to be used to connecting with an audience. I'm not saying you need millions of people, but you need a core group of people. Because those are the ones who are going to help you to spread out. You're not going to be able to spread word of mouth all by yourself. You're going to have a group of people to do that. And it's going to be dependent on how active those people are and how many are they as to how much money you can raise. And there is no figure. If you have 5,000 followers, you should be able to raise $30,000. No, I don't know. There are people who have 5,000 followers and only 100 people gave money. So 30,000 is not going to, if they give $10 a piece, you're going to get a couple thousand. You're not. There's also a huge correlation between the number of people who are lurkers and the people who actually will take money out of their wallet and give it to you. And in presentations that I give, I show Freddie Wong as an example. He's on YouTube and has raised 2 times on Kickstarter. Significant amounts of money. But if you look at how many subscribers Freddie Wong has on his YouTube channel, it's 4.7 million subscribers. So you would think, oh, he can raise millions. Only 10,000 of those people gave money in any degree in his last Kickstarter. So it was very lot less than what he has as his followers. So we were talking about in these recent Canadian workshops, the 99-1 rule, which Julie Giles talks about. She's from Green Hat Digital. And she said 90% of your following are lurkers. They're people who are just watching. They never participate. They've clicked your page of like and they've never come back, or they just see you in the newsfeed and they never do anything about it. 9% of those people will retweet you, will put a thumbs up next to a comment or leave a comment, but they're not tight to you. You know, they participate, but they aren't going to convert. Only 1% of your super core, hardcore fans will ever do anything to help you, that actually actively spread the word, support everything you do, pay money to go to your events, show up if you have a meetup, that kind of thing. So when you're looking at your stats online and you think that all those 5,000 people are a sale, you'll be very disappointed when push comes to shove about how many people actually pony up for the money. So I would say that if you haven't even gotten started, no kind of crowdfunding effort should be started. If you have gotten started, you're going to have to be realistic. It's better to go over your goal than it is to not make your goal. So set it realistically. You know, how much do you really need to do what it is, and is that the main goal behind this campaign? Is it to raise money, or is it mainly to build an audience, to build up that participation? And money's nice, but that's not the main idea behind this effort, is to grow beyond your core, because a campaign like that usually helps you to get more people beyond the people that you're already engaged with, because they help you, and there's an impetus to it because there's a deadline as opposed to constantly saying, hey, you know, retweet my stuff, hey, share my stuff. You know, that's just kind of an arbitrary effort. If you have a campaign where there's a deadline and you're all working towards some kind of, you know, goal, then there's reason to activate those people in a certain time frame, and that's what a campaign is. You know, it's a limited amount of time that you're doing some effort. If money is your only thing, then you're going to have to be careful about how much you're asking to raise, because it depends on how helpful the audience that you already have is going to be to you.